Welcome, dear listener, to a gentle voyage through time. An invitation to let go of today's cares and drift slowly into the world of ancient Egypt. As you settle into your favorite spot, perhaps under a soft blanket or accompanied by a pillow that cradles your head just so, allow your breathing to become calm and steady. In the soft glow of moonlight, imagine yourself at the edge of the Nile River, where the water drifts quietly past lush reeds and palm trees. In this tranquil space, we will follow the footsteps of a young scribe named Amos, whose life was guided by ink, papyrus, and the whisper of reeds against water. Let the gentle cadence of this story ease you towards sleep, as we explore the daily life of an ancient Egyptian scribe. Peaceful moments, small joys, and the rituals that shaped each gentle day. Each morning, as the first pale light of dawn crept across the horizon, Amos awakened in his humble mud brick house. The soft hush of a world at rest greeted him as he rose, rubbing sleep from his eyes. From his small window, he could hear the faint cooing of doves perched on rooftops, and the distant murmur of the Nile's current slipping through papyrus reeds. In these moments, before the village stirred, Amos treasured a few minutes of quiet reflection. The soft scent of freshly baked bread drifting from his mother's hearth, the gentle warmth of the rising sun on his face, and the faint odor of rich black ink drying on wooden pallets. Today, like every day, he would set out to fulfill his duties as a scribe, a guardian of words, numbers, and the recorded history of his people. Though his work carried importance, his heart remained light, focused on the rhythms of each breath, each stroke of reed upon papyrus, and the slow passing of time in the land of the timeless river. In the kitchen, Amos's mother, Nefret, moved with practiced ease. She tended a small hearth fire stoked by narrow clay logs. The walls of their home were cool, offering respite from the growing heat outside. A simple linen garment draped over her shoulders, and her dark hair was bound with a thin strip of cloth, while a small bowl of barley porridge bubbled gently over the flame. She hummed a quiet tune, an old lullaby she once heard during her own childhood, while she stirred in a handful of dates and honey. The aroma of sweet porridge mingled with the faint earthiness of drying papyrus that Amos carried in his satchel. As he sat cross-legged near the hearth, he dipped his fingers into the soft porridge, savoring the subtle sweetness that prepared him for the day ahead. In these gentle domestic moments, the world felt at peace, a world that, just beyond their mud brick walls, was beginning to awaken in hues of rose and gold. After breaking his fast, Ahmos washed his hands in a shallow basin of cool water drawn from a nearby well. He wrapped a clean linen sash around his waist and adjusted the simple reed pen tucked beneath the cloth. His satchel, made of dried animal hide, held slender sheets of papyrus, each preciously white and waiting for ink. Before stepping outside, he paused to look at a small wooden plaque hanging on the wall. A painted image of Thoth, the ibis-headed god of writing and wisdom. With a soft exhale, he whispered a brief prayer of thanks, fingers tracing the painted feathers on the plaque. The door opened to a gentle breeze that carried the scents of dew-laden earth and blossoming acacia trees. As Amos stepped into the morning light, his sandals made soft, rhythmic sounds against the packed mud floor of the courtyard. He gazed across the village, a cluster of mud brick homes, small gardens filled with vegetables and herbs, and children already running toward the river to refill clay jars with water. The beat of daily life began slowly, as if the entire village moved as one collective breath, in tune with the timeless flow of the Nile. Stepping onto the narrow earthen path that led toward the local temple and administrative quarter, Amos's senses were filled with quiet wonders. The air was already warm, but not yet scorching. A few merchants arranged their small stalls of woven baskets and clay pots, their voices low, bargaining softly with early customers. Palm trees lined the edges of the path, their fronds whispering in the breeze, and papyrus plants leaned gently toward the water. Amos greeted each neighbor, a fisherman carrying a bundle of reed baskets, an older woman gathering flax for weaving, and a child balancing a pot of freshly drawn water on her head. Each soft nod and whispered greeting felt like the beating of a collective, peaceful heart, binding the villagers in solidarity beneath Egypt's golden sun. As he walked, the world seemed to slow. The distant silhouette of a small temple dedicated to Thoth appeared, its weathered limestone walls catching the light. Though not grand by the standards of the great temples further north, this humble sanctuary was the heart of his journalistic world, the place where Amos would spend most of his hours, sliding his reed pen across delicate papyrus to record tax registers, transcribe letters, and preserve the memory of daily transactions for future generations. Yet even as his work carried significance, it felt as gentle as the breeze. Each stroke of his pen was a simple act of creation, words and numbers taking shape on papyrus, forming the careful tapestry of life within these mud brick walls. Upon entering the temple compound, Amos paused at the threshold to greet the coolness that filled the shaded courtyard. The stone floor was smooth beneath his sandals, worn by the footsteps of countless scribes and pilgrims before him. Columns of papyrus capitals rose on either side, their carved forms both elegant and familiar. Inside, the faint aroma of burning incense lingered, fragrant resin smoke curling toward the open ceiling, where glimpses of sky offered reassurance that the world outside continued its steady pulse. A few temple servants moved about, carrying clay oil lamps or stacking wooden crates of papyrus reeds. In the corner, a small basin of water reflected the soft morning light, and a lone ibis statue, painted in earthy ochres, stood sentinel atop a sandstone plinth. It was here, in this hushed domain, that Amos's day truly began. Making his way to a shaded alcove, Amos unfolded his satchel and gently withdrew a smooth wooden pallet, small jars of oil-based ink, and neatly rolled sheets of papyrus. His reed pens, cut with precision to create a fine, tapered tip, rested on a low table carved from desert limestone. Each tool was an extension of his mind, enabling him to transform thoughts and numbers into the quiet permanence of written record. He arranged his materials with care. A thin cloth to wipe his hands, a shallow bowl holding water to mix pigments, and a small handcrafted wooden box filled with dried reeds that would eventually become more pens. The simple act of preparation felt almost meditative, as though each careful motion tethered him more firmly to the present moment. Moments later, Amos settled cross-legged on a reed mat, placing a fresh sheet of papyrus before him. The texture was rough yet pliable, each stalk of pith woven into an unspoken promise of stories yet to be told. He dipped his reed pen into the dark ink, savoring the slight resistance of the pen's tip against the jar's interior. Then, with measured calm, he began to etch the first line. A record of grain rations distributed to temple workers. The reeds of his pen whispered as they dragged across the papyrus surface, each hieroglyph a small, deliberate shape, curved lines forming images of water, birds, and offerings. With each stroke, a gentle thrill of purpose warmed Ahmos's heart, for he knew that these words would endure long after the voices of those who spoke them had faded into memory. With the initial grain register completed, Amos paused to stretch his shoulders, feeling the slight tension from hours spent leaning over papyrus. Beyond the alcove's columns, the temple courtyard now buzzed with discreet activity. Priests offered morning prayers in hushed tones, their linen kilts whispering against sandstone, while servants delivered baskets of fresh figs and dates to the altars. Outside, the Nile's waters glimmered under a full yet muted sun, sending ripples of light dancing across the temple's stone walls. Amos glanced at a nearby scribe's bench, where a more senior scribe named Hapu sat, his face lined with years of service and quiet wisdom. Hapu gave a slow nod, acknowledging Amos's presence, and returned to his own work, transcribing a letter intended for the governor in a far-off district. Scribes like Amos and Hapu occupied a respected place in society, bridging the worlds of pharaohs, priests, and common folk through the power of the written word. But their lives were not lofty or distant. Rather, they were intertwined with the rhythms of daily existence. Their desks overlooked the courtyard garden, where papyrus plants rustled softly, and where courtyard cats slept in patches of sunlight. Occasionally, a gentle breeze carried the scent of fresh bread from neighboring homes, reminding Amos of his mother's warm hospitality and the simple joys awaiting him later that day. With each hieroglyph he wrote, he felt anchored by purpose, each sign a small echo of the divine order that Thoth represented. Tucked between columns, Amos continued his task of copying a set of instructions for building a new granary in a nearby village. The text was straightforward: lists of materials, measurements of mud brick, and times for labor. But as Amos wrote, he allowed his mind to wander through the process. He envisioned villagers mixing clay with straw, forming bricks under the midday sun, then stacking them to shape walls that would eventually store the golden grain. Each scene was as gentle as a lullaby. Workers laughing softly as they lifted baskets, children playing near the riverbank while adults toiled. Inhabitants would later gather under the shade of date palms, sharing sweet palm wine and stories as the sun dipped low. Amos's pen moved slowly, the temple's quiet ambiance lulling him into a serene rhythm that matched the world outside. As the sun climbed higher, Amos felt a gentle warmth on his shoulders. He carefully placed a small piece of linen cloth over his satchel, protecting the remaining papyrus from direct light. A temple servant entered bearing a shallow bowl of cool water, scented faintly with lotus petals. Amos dipped his fingers into the water, flicking droplets onto his face to refresh himself. He looked up to see the tile roofs of nearby homes, their sun-baked surfaces glowing amber. Beyond them, the Nile's steady current shimmered in the heat haze, sending tiny ripples toward distant fields. In this moment, the boundary between work and the natural world felt beautifully blurred, a harmony of ink, papyrus, water, and sun. Turning back to his work, Amos retrieved a small stack of administrative letters. These letters, sent by tax collectors and administrators from various villages, needed copying before they were dispatched to the governor's archives. As he unrolled each letter, he admired the varied handwriting of distant scribes, some precise and compact, others fluid and decorative. He recognized phrases that spoke of barley shortages, minor disputes over land boundaries, and requests for new clay dikes to protect fields from seasonal flooding. Carefully, he transcribed each letter, ensuring that the meaning remained intact. The act of copying another's words required gentle concentration. Too much haste could distort a sign, altering a name or an amount and causing confusion later. So Amos let his hand move at a measured pace, as though each hieroglyph were a small meditation. Often, passers-by paused to watch Amos at work. A temple official adjusting his linen sash, a young apprentice scribe taking notes on carved ostraca, and even a graceful stork striding along the courtyard's sunlit edge. Each presence was part of a living tapestry, humans, animals, and architecture coexisting in muted harmony. Amos felt a sense of calm pride knowing that, through his steady hand, these words would travel from temple to governor's palace, ensuring the smooth flow of resources and messages that supported life along the Nile. Yet he never rushed. Instead, he embraced the deliberate pace, mindful that every slow breath and gentle stroke was an offering to the day's serenity. Around midday, the temple's ritual bells chimed softly, a reminder that the priests would soon gather for a brief offering ceremony to honor Thoth. The courtyard, once filled with gentle scribal murmurs, hushed for a time as incense smoke curled skyward and the priests intoned a quiet hymn to the ibis-headed god. Amos paused, his pen hovering above papyrus to fold his hands respectfully. Warm afternoon light filtered through papyrus columns, creating a soft tapestry of dappled shadows on the stone floor. As the hymn concluded, The priests accepted fresh loaves of bread and small bowls of sweet honey from temple attendants. The offering, though modest, carried deep significance, a reaffirmation of order and wisdom in a world ruled by balance. After the ritual, Ahmose and Hapu retreated to a separate, shaded bench to share a simple midday meal. They sat cross-legged on a reed mat, each holding a loaf of barley bread, with a small cluster of sun-ripened figs. The figs were still warm from the sun, their flesh yielding a gentle sweetness when bitten. Ahmose took a slow, mindful bite, feeling the soft fruit's juices mingle with the dense texture of bread. Hapu, older and quiet, sipped from a small clay cup filled with water and a few drops of crushed pomegranate juice. The two scribes spoke little, savoring the peaceful moment. Two colleagues united by ink and papyrus, sustained by simple grains and seasonal fruits. Their conversation, when it came, was soft and reflective. Hapu remarked on the unusual swirl patterns in the Nile's water that morning, a sign that a head of the river might shift soon, affecting local irrigation. Ahmose listened intently, nodding as he imagined fields of green stretching along the riverbanks. In turn, Ahmose mentioned a dream he'd had of writing upon golden scrolls, the sun's rays dancing across each hieroglyph. Hapu smiled knowingly, reminding him that dreams often carried gentle messages if one listened carefully. For a few moments longer, they lingered in silence. Two scribes connected by shared reverence for words, water, and the world's quiet mysteries. Refreshed by their quiet meal, Ahmose returned to his desk with a calm mind and steady heart. The afternoon air drifted through open windows, carrying the gentle hum of cicadas and the fragrance of lotus blossoms floating on a shallow pool in the courtyard. He unrolled another piece of papyrus, this one a school exercise for a young apprentice learning hieroglyphic basics. Today's lesson focused on simple glyphs: the sun, the owl, the water ripple. As Ahmose copied each glyph onto the student's papyrus, he imagined the child's small hands eventually guiding the pen to shape phrases of deeper meaning, poems to the Nile, prayers to Ra, or records of simple village life. In this way, each stroke he penned became a seed planted in fertile ground, destined to grow into future knowledge and scribal heritage. Within the quiet of the scriptorium, Ahmose encountered minor challenges: an ink stain on a precious sheet of papyrus, the tip of his reed pen wearing thin, or the midday heat making his arm slightly sluggish. Yet rather than frustration, he met each small setback with gentle patience. He laid the damp papyrus aside, folding it carefully so the stain would dry in place without smudging adjacent areas. He selected a fresh reed pen from his wooden box, smoothing its tip against a small grinding stone to restore a fine, tapered point. He paused to take a few deep breaths. Inhale, exhale, letting the world's quiet harmony fill his mind before continuing to write. Each challenge was but a ripple in a calm pond, soon subsiding beneath the weight of slow, mindful intent. When the sun shifted toward late afternoon, painting the courtyard in longer golden slants, a temple overseer approached Ahmose with a sealed letter from the governor's palace. The parchment was wrapped in fine linen strands and stamped with red pigment. With reverence, Ahmose set aside his current task and carefully untied the linen binding. Inside lay instructions to record a detailed census of local livestock, cattle and goats that grazed on the marshy edges of the Nile. The overseer explained that accurate records were essential for planning next season's grain offerings to the gods. Ahmose listened as the overseer spoke in soft, measured tones, then nodded, feeling the familiar flutter of purpose awaken inside him. Gathering his materials, Ahmose rose and left the scriptorium, stepping once more into the courtyard's warm light. The air smelled of sun-baked stone and lotus incense. Ahead, a small group of farmers waited, each holding a tally stick carved with notches indicating their own livestock counts. Cattle lowed softly in nearby pens, and goats wandered along the banks, nibbling on tender reeds. Ahmose offered a polite greeting to each farmer, his voice gentle as he explained the census process. One by one, they presented their sticks, recounting notches and murmuring names of herd members. Ahmose transcribed each tally into his papyrus scroll, the ink flowing smoothly as he wrote 10 cows, 4 goats, 7 goats, and so on. The scene was peaceful, a quiet negotiation between man, animal, and scribe, underscored by the consistent rhythm of reed pen on papyrus. As the late afternoon sun began its slow descent, Ahmose finished the livestock census and returned to the scriptorium to begin transcribing the final entries. His arm moved methodically, forming each hieroglyph with care. Cows represented by a stretched silhouette, goats by a curling goat's head, and numbers encoded in simple vertical strokes. The temple's bell tolled once, signaling that the day's formal tasks were closing. In the soft hush that followed, Ahmose gently rolled his completed papyrus scroll, securing it with a narrow strip of linen. He labeled it in small cursive hieratic script, Livestock Census, Year 12 of Pharaoh Neferkare. Next, he took a moment for personal reflection. Placing his tools aside, Ahmose sat near the shallow basin of water in the courtyard, brushing his fingertips through the cool liquid. Reflected in the surface was the amber sky streaked with late-day clouds. A gentle breeze stirred papyrus fronds, and the distant call of a fishing bird drifted across the courtyard. In these quiet moments, Ahmose allowed his mind to float, recalling the morning's gentle interactions, the satisfying flow of ink across papyrus, and the simple pleasures of shared bread and figs. Each memory settled like a soft stone in his heart, grounding him. When the sun dipped low enough that the temple's courtyard lay mostly in shadow, Ahmose collected his belongings and prepared to return home. He folded his linen sash neatly, tucked his reed pens into the wooden box, and draped his satchel securely across his shoulder. The courtyard's oil lamps flickered to life. Small clay lamps brimming with sesame oil, their flames dancing against stone walls. Priests were finishing evening prayers, their whispers like distant echoes. In the cool shade, Ahmose paused one last time to offer silent gratitude to Thoth, tracing the carved relief of the ibis-headed god with his gaze, before turning toward the path leading back to the village. The path back to Ahmose's home was bathed in the soft glow of dusk. Torches flickered along the edges of the road, illuminating small clusters of villagers heading back to their own dwellings. Ahmose walked slowly, enjoying the cooler air that carried the scent of fresh herbs drying in nearby gardens, coriander, dill, and parsley. He passed by a small field where workers tended a crop of lentils. Their simple chants rose and fell like distant waves. Further on, clusters of palm trees lined the roadside, their silhouettes etched against the fading sky. Each step felt as measured and meaningful as the hieroglyphs he penned that morning, and Ahmose welcomed the unhurried pace of his journey home. As Ahmose approached his mud brick house, the warm glow of a clay oil lamp shone through the small window near the door. He entered to find his younger sister Sinet sweeping the courtyard floor with a broom made of dried reeds. She glanced up and smiled, her hair braided into 2 simple plaits, and her linen dress dusted with straw. Their mother, Nefret, set out a small clay basin of water near the entrance, scented with jasmine petals. Ahmose washed his hands and face, letting the cool water wash away the day's dust. In the corner of the courtyard, a small table held a shallow dish of lentil stew, Ahmose's favorite, and a jug of cool, slightly fermented date wine meant to be sipped slowly. They sat together on low stools made of woven reeds, Ahmose leaning back to feel the evening breeze soften his shoulders. The stew was warm and comforting, its savory aroma rising gently in the night air. Nefret spoke softly of the day's events, how the fish were plentiful along the Nile that afternoon, how the midwife had delivered a healthy baby boy in the neighboring home, and how the local baker planned to bake bread early in the morning. Senet chimed in with childlike excitement about the upcoming festival of Opet, where music and dance would fill the temple courtyard soon. Each story drifted through Ahmose's mind like a lullaby, weaving comfort and contentment into his heart. Dinner conversations faded into contented silence as the family finished their meal. Amos brushed his fingers across the table's surface. Feeling faint remnants of stew that clung to his fingertips, he sighed softly, the day's activities settling into his bones like a well-worn rhythm. Senet wandered off to chase a small tortoise that had appeared near the herb garden, her laughter echoing like raindrops in a quiet cavern. Nefret collected the clay dishes and took them to a small hearth, where she would clean them under the dim glow of a single oil lamp. The courtyard's cool night air carried the distant sounds of frogs croaking by the river and the occasional chatter of crickets hidden among papyrus leaves. Each sound was gentle, like a soft brush stroke in an impressionist painting, crafting a lullaby for the ears. After cleaning the dishes, Amos rose to fetch his satchel from a low shelf inside the house. He laid out his writing tools once more, his wooden palette, ink jars, and a few blank sheets of papyrus, near the courtyard's small, shallow basin. This would be his final task of the day, a personal journal entry detailing his observations, thoughts, and gentle musings. Sitting cross-legged, he dipped his reed pen into black ink and began to write. Today, I awakened when the first pale light touched my window. The scent of my mother's porridge greeted me, and I walked slowly to the temple, feeling the Nile's soft breeze on my face. With each word, Amos let his mind drift, his thoughts weaving through events both mundane and magical. He described the farmers' quiet laughter as they counted their goats, the warmth of the midday sun on papyrus, and the sweet taste of figs. Each memory was tender, carefully set down so that when he returned to this journal in the future, he could revisit these peaceful moments. Time passed slowly as the stars emerged overhead, each one a tiny beacon in the vast, dark canopy above. The moon, the waxing crescent, cast a pale glow across the courtyard. Amos finished his final sentence. And now, as the night grows still, I am grateful for another day in the land of the gentle river. He folded the papyrus carefully, placing it in his satchel alongside the completed census scrolls. He rinsed his hands in the basin, letting the cool water wash over his skin one last time before he closed the satchel and rose. Nefret called softly from inside the house, reminding him it was nearly time for bed. Amos placed his tools in a low wooden chest and tucked his satchel beneath a simple wooden shelf. He stepped through the courtyard and entered his small bedroom. A single room with a low reed bed topped with a woven straw mattress and a linen blanket. The room was cool, the walls painted with faint, calming images of lotus blossoms and geese in flight. In one corner, a small clay lamp burned with a gentle flame, casting dancing shadows that flickered like silent dancers across the ceiling. Amos settled onto his bed, his back resting against a pile of linen pillows. He closed his eyes, letting his breathing slow and his thoughts drift forward into dreams. As he lay there, Amos imagined the river's current, how it would flow beneath a silver moon, carrying reed boats and laden feluccas downstream. He pictured the fields beyond the village, now dark and waiting for sunrise. In his mind, he walked along the riverbank, feeling the cool sand beneath his sandals and hearing the quiet lap of water against the shore. Soft breezes carried distant scents, lotus blossoms drifting across calm waters, incense from the temple's last prayers of the day, and the earthy aroma of drying papyrus. Each sensation lulled him deeper into relaxation. With a contented sigh, Amos allowed the world he had recorded in ink to fade into the silent realm of sleep. In the world outside, the Nile's quiet current continued its ancient song, flowing, whispering, carrying life and memory together under the watchful stars. In his bed, Amos drifted into a restful slumber, dreams weaving gentle tales of papyrus and ink, of sunlit courtyards and the distant call of ibis wings. May you, dear listener, find your own peaceful sleep as you journey alongside Amos through the soothing rhythms of a day in the life of an ancient Egyptian scribe. Rest now, and let the river of dreams carry you gently onward.